My name is Amelia, and for 3 years I have been married to the perfect man. Jonathan was everything I had ever dreamed of, a constellation of qualities I thought existed only in the pages of the novels I cherished. He was gentle, his voice a calm, steady cadence that could soothe any anxiety. He was wise, not with the boisterous certainty of a scholar, but with the quiet, deep-rooted knowledge of someone who had truly observed the world. And his eyes were the most captivating of all. They were the color of aged whiskey, and they held a peculiar melancholic depth, as if they had witnessed not just years but centuries. We met in a dusty antique shop in Boston, a place that smelled of forgotten stories and old polish. I was admiring a delicate Art Nouveau hair comb, and he appeared beside me, not with a salesman's pitch, but with a story. "That's from 1910, he'd said softly. The lilies of the valley were a symbol of happiness returning. It was likely a gift for a beloved daughter. He knew the history of every object in that shop, not just the facts, but the human heartbeats behind them. He could hum forgotten melodies from the turn of the century with an unsettling familiarity. Our courtship was a whirlwind of museum visits, quiet conversations in jazz clubs that felt suspended in time, and long walks where he spoke of history not as a dry subject but as a lived experience. I felt I had found my missing half, the soul that completed my own. I believed it was destiny. But I was wrong. So profoundly and terrifyingly wrong. Jonathan was not the man he seemed. The first crack in my perfect reality appeared on a rain-soaked afternoon. The sky was a sheet of gray, and a restless energy drove me to finally sort through the clutter in the attic of our old Victorian home, a house he had chosen, I now realize, for its ability to hold secrets. Amidst the shrouded furniture and forgotten trunks, my fingers brushed against a worn, leather-bound portfolio tucked away in a dark corner as if ashamed. My heart hammered against my ribs as I undid the brittle clasp. Inside was an oil painting, and on that canvas was Jonathan. Unmistakably, undeniably him. Not a doppelganger, not a distant relative. It was the exact curve of his lips, the same intense, sorrowful gaze, the unique arch of his eyebrow. But he was dressed in the formal, high-collared attire of the Victorian era, his posture stiff yet elegant. My hands trembled as I turned the heavy frame over. On the back, in an elegant faded script, was a date, autumn 1898, and below it an inscription that froze the blood in my veins: "To my eternity, my dearest Jonathan. Yours always, Eleanor." A cold dread, sharp and immediate, coiled in my stomach. I tried to rationalize it, a remarkable ancestor, a bizarre coincidence, a trick of the light. But the feeling, a primal, gut-wrenching certainty that the foundations of my world were false, refused to leave me. It was a seed of doubt, and it began to sprout tendrils of fear. What began as a nervous curiosity soon morphed into a quiet, desperate obsession. I started my investigation in the local library's archives, my pulse racing every time I touched a brittle newspaper page. I began with the 1890s, my search fueled by the name on the painting, and then I found him. Not Jonathan, but a Mr. Jonathan Blackwood, listed as a minor patron of the arts in a society column from 1897. The description of his penetrating gaze and old-world charm matched perfectly. My search widened, spiraling through decades. I spent hours hunched over microfilm readers, my eyes straining in the dim light. And I found him again and again. He was there in a grainy photograph of construction workers on the Golden Gate Bridge in the 1930s, his face turned slightly away from the camera, but unmistakable. He stood, sharp-suited and somber, in a crowd on the streets of Chicago during the Prohibition era. He was captured in the background of a Life magazine spread about a jazz club in 1950s New York. The clothes changed, the hairstyles evolved, but his face, remained a constant and unchanging island in the relentless river of time. The names shifted, Jonathan, Jack, Joseph, Julian, but the eyes, those ancient, weary eyes, were always the same. I had been foolish, so incredibly naive, to think he was just a man who aged well. The truth was far more terrifying, a reality so warped it threatened to shatter my mind. The final, horrifying piece of the puzzle fell into place when I discovered his hiding place. Driven by a feverish need to know, I had spent a weekend tapping floorboards and searching behind walls while he was away on a business trip I now deeply doubted. In a dark, cobweb-filled crawlspace beneath the floor of his study, my knuckles rapped against cold, unyielding metal. It was an old, heavy strongbox, its lock rusted with age. It took me another day and a crowbar to finally wrench it open. Inside, I didn't find money or gold. I found his soul, or what was left of it. Dozens of journals, their leather bindings in various states of decay, filled the space. The pages, hundreds upon hundreds of them, were filled with the same elegant, consistent handwriting, a script that showed no tremor of age, no evolution of style across the decades. This was where the truth lay, naked and horrifying. He did not age. He was immortal, a curse, a gift. The journals revealed he no longer knew the difference. He wrote of the initial wonder turning to dust, of watching the world change while he remained a fixed point. The pages were a litany of love and loss, a heartbreaking chronicle of names. Eleanor, who had succumbed to the Spanish flu in 1918, her hand growing cold in his. Charlotte, whose life was stolen by a drunk driver on a rainy night in 1955. Isabel, who he had buried after a long illness in 1980, her laughter now just a ghost in his memory. Dozens of names. Margaret Evelyn Rose. All of them had been his wives. All of them had been me, women he loved, cherished, and inevitably mourned. I was not special. I was not unique. I was merely the latest chapter, Amelia, in his endless, agonizing book of life, a book where every story ended the same way. When I confronted him, there was no denial, no anger, no frantic attempt to explain. The air in our beautiful living room grew heavy and still. He simply sat in his armchair, the very picture of a weary king on a forgotten throne, and looked at me. In that gaze, I saw the accumulated weight of countless sunsets, the echoes of countless goodbyes. "I love you, Amelia," he said, his voice so quiet it was almost a whisper. "I have loved you all. Each time it is real. It is the only thing that makes this existence bearable. But to remember hundreds of faces, hundreds of voices that have all fallen silent, to carry every smile, every whispered secret, every final breath, this is not living. This is a torture I would not wish upon my greatest enemy. I wanted to run, to scream, to tell the world of the impossible man I had married. But who would believe me? How could I possibly prove it? I would be labeled hysterical, insane. And as I looked into his eyes, I understood the most horrifying truth of all. I still loved him. The love was real, a vibrant, living thing within me. But his love was a life sentence. To be loved by Jonathan meant to be loved boundlessly, completely, and then to become another name in the metal box, another portrait in the attic, a cherished but fading memory in a mind that could hold too many. I had thought him a monster, a predator hiding a terrible secret. But the journals had shown me the truth. He was the ultimate victim of his own existence, a prisoner in the gilded cage of eternity, forced to watch everyone he ever cared for turn to dust. And I had become his unwitting jailer. I lived with the man I loved, sharing a bed, a life, a home, all while carrying the crushing knowledge that our love story, the most profound experience of my life, was merely a fleeting, poignant paragraph in the epic of his endless years. And now I often find myself looking at our wedding photograph, our young, hopeful faces frozen in a moment of joy. The question echoes in the silence of our perfect house: who is truly trapped? Is it he, doomed to walk the earth forever, a perpetual mourner at the funeral of time? Or is it I, destined to be nothing more than a whisper, a shadow, a name etched in fading ink on a page in a dark box, forever loved but eternally lost in the vast, lonely expanse of his memory? There is no answer. There is only the quiet house in New England where the past breathes just beneath the floorboards, and our future, our entire precious, heartbreaking future, has already been written on the pages of an old, old diary,